Today I'm brewing the English beer style of Burton Ale, and after nearly 2 years of brewing every week, I'm going to show you the things in my brewery that I think are the most useful for brew day. My name is Martin Keane and I am taking the Homebrew Challenge to brew 99 beers in 99 weeks, and this is week 98. And this is where things get a little bit complicated as to which style I'm going to brew. It's Burton Ale, so let's get it mashed in and I'll explain. Now, the 99 beers part of the Homebrew Challenge comes from the BJCP guidelines. My idea was at the start of this to start with category 1A, which was American Light Lager, and brew all the way through to category 27, which was the historical beer style of Sati. That is 99 beers. But here's the thing, I skipped 2 of the styles. When I got to the sour category, I realized that some of these sour beers, well, they take a while to condition. I kettle soured where I could, so I could still have the beer ready for tasting and to put that in the video. But some of these styles really aren't intended for kettle souring. They need to be properly soured in a fermenter. I brewed 2 of those and they're sat in my basement where they will sit until next Christmas, ready for tasting. But I ended up skipping 23C and 23E from that because I just didn't want 4 beers sitting around that I couldn't taste for a year. So that brought me to 97 beers. I need 2 more to get to my 99. Well, it turns out in 2018, the BJCP released some provisional beer styles. These were extra styles in addition to those 99. Those are Catarina Sour, New Zealand Pilsner, New England IPA, and this one, Burton Ale. So I had to pick 2 from that list, and today I picked Burton Ale, and I'll pick 1 more for my final beer next week. I'm going to be mashing this beer at 150 Fahrenheit or 66 Celsius for about an hour. So let's now talk about what a Burton Ale actually is. Now, Burton Ale was most popular in the 1700s, where it was really considered an export beer. It was exported out of the port of Hull in the United Kingdom to various countries in Europe, to Russia, and to the West Indies. Now, I wanted to read to you the style guidelines, the BJCP style guidelines description of this beer. They describe it as a rich, malty, sweet and bitter dark ale, moderately strong alcohol, full-bodied, chewy and a hoppy finish. That sounds like a lot of characteristics to meet, but actually Burton Ale is quite a simple beer to brew. So in terms of original gravity, I'm looking at 1064, around a 6.5% beer, so that's the moderately alcoholic part. And the recipe, well, it's mainly Maris Otter. 97% of the grist is Maris Otter. And then to get the color that we're looking for, I'm using 3% of chocolate malt. Now, in the course of brewing all of these beers, things have changed in my little home brewery a bit over time. Some of that stuff is obvious, like I have a new brew kettle, new fermenters, and so forth. But there's all sorts of little process changes and bits of equipment that I've been using that I've found to be really useful and efficient for my brew days. Let's take a look at some of those. Now, I bought this sink years ago on eBay Getting a sink put in the brewery here is one of the best things that I've done. I've got a space here to get water into my brew kettles, and then a ton of space here to clean stuff up as well with a spray hose. It sounds like a obvious thing, but this is so much better than having to run hoses to the outside. The other thing that I've done is I've added a quick release onto my faucet here, so I can take off my RV filter. I could put on something else like my bottle cleaner, and there's no screwing around. It's just nice and easy. Now, when I started my 99 challenge, I was adamant that I wanted my own kind of homebrew store at home of grain selection, so a bunch of specialty grains and base malts. I tend not to use this so much anymore because all my ingredients are supplied for me by Atlantic Brew Supply. But before that was the case, it was very handy to have malts on hand, and I could just kind of get up in the morning and say, hey, I'm going to brew this beer today, and I could probably have the ingredients to pull it together. I do get questions in the comments quite frequently about these little containers here, which I use for my specialty malts. Just found these at the dollar store. They fit about 2 or 3 pounds of specialty grains in them. In addition to that, I have some larger buckets, and then I have something called Vittles Vaults, which I think is intended for pet food, but also conveniently stores a full bag of grain, a full 50-pound bag in there. As far as actually brewing the beer itself, there are 3 things that I really am pleased that I'm using as part of my every week process. Now, the first of those is this Clawhammer 240 volt system. I have put dozens of batches of beer through this thing, and it is completely held up over time. It's really easy to use. I'm a big fan of this system. When it comes to fermenting, I've really settled on these Spike Brewing fermenters. They are stainless steel, conical, and they just have the ability to add so many different attachments and do all sorts of different things with your fermentation. This is the Spike CF5, and this is the Flex Plus, ready to receive today's beer. And under this jungle of wires and temperature controllers is my Blickman Glycol chiller. Before I had this chiller, I had 3 chest freezers here in the brewery, and those have all been replaced by this one unit. So it's a huge space saver, and it also means that I can now very accurately control the fermentation temperature of my brews. So that's where I am today. The brewery, of course, will keep on evolving over time. Speaking of which, I've got a new gadget to try out today, which might just make my brew day a tiny little bit easier. Before I end my mash, I typically take a pre-boil gravity reading to see if I've hit my numbers using a hydrometer. The trouble is, you can't just use a hydrometer in the mash temperature wort because it's calibrated to 68 Fahrenheit. So I have to take a temperature reading of the wort and then take whatever number I'm getting from the hydrometer and convert it to the correct temperature adjusted value. A reader in the comments said to me though, hey, you know that you can get hydrometers that are calibrated to mash temperature. That's what I've got here. This is calibrated to 155 Fahrenheit, so I should just be able to take a reading directly from the wort at mash temperatures. And by golly, that seemed to actually have worked. The mash calibrated hydrometer gave me a reading of around 1052. The regular 68 degree calibrated hydrometer gave me a reading of 136, which when adjusted for temperature converts to 1051. That's a little step less in my brew day. Okay, so let's get these grains out and get going with the boil. So now let's talk about the hoppy side of this beer. I'm going to be using EKG, East Kent Golding, for everything. At the start of the boil, which is right now, I'm going to be putting in 2 bags or 2 ounces of EKG. This will give me IBU in the sort of the mid 30s. We're going for a beer in total of about 43 IBU. So let's add these in. Now with 10 minutes to go in the boil, that's when I'll be cracking out this third packet of EKG and adding that in. And then I have a fourth one, which I'm going to keep for the dry hop. So as the beer is beginning to come to an end of fermentation, I'll be throwing this bag in as well. Now, as for yeast, after much consideration, I decided to go for WLP 023 Burton ale yeast. Genius. I'm going to be adding this in and fermenting at 70 Fahrenheit or 21 Celsius. And as I mentioned, as the fermentation begins to die down, so when I start to see a lack of bubbles going on here, or it's slowing down here in this airlock, then that is when I will add my final charge of hops. But that's it, Brew Day for number 98 in the books. And here is the finished beer, Burton Ale. So the colour of this one, it's kind of mud brown.
Yeah, it's questionable.
It's really that mid-ground between light and dark, and it just ends up looking, yeah, muddy brown. Nice, there's a nice contrast between the white head and...
Yeah, it's very murky, and there's something in mine. Is that still some of your hops or something swirling around?
Look, this beer is supposed to be quite complicated.
Okay.
All sorts going on. So let's see what we get.
Okay.
Are we going to use your favourite word?
I don't know. I don't know what my favourite word is right now.
Complex.
Oh, complex, yeah. Maybe. Yeah, I'm getting like bready notes. Like toasty. But also kind of a little bit sweet. Bit complex.
A bit complex, yeah. Lots going on with that smell.
Tastes kind of like roasty as well.
Let's give it a try. Initial taste, like, kind of English bittery sort of style. But sweeter. With a bit of roastiness to it. And a little bit of sort of high alcohol taste to it as well.
Okay, because I was about to say, it tastes like, if you've ever had like malt beer, like malt liquor beer, you know, like that strong taste, it has a subtle taste of that.
It
does. Just like kind of like makes you shiver a little
just on
bit.
the back end.
Yeah. Which
you can tell there's a reasonable amount of alcohol in this.
So it reminds me of like Robin Hood. Like all the merry men would be drinking this out of their like little things. More wench. Yes, I can say that right. So it was pretty good after a while, but I can't believe next week is gonna be the 99th beer.
It's gonna be a pretty special one, I think. And I'm not gonna say any more than that, but I do have something pretty cool lined up. But until then, Lauren, thank you for trying this Burton Ale, and thank you for trying all of these beers over this last couple of years.
I know, I didn't actually know I was going to sign up for this many. It was just fun, and then all of a sudden, here I am. I don't regret any of them, though. They're very good.
Even the smoked beer?
Maybe not that one.
All right, well, thank you, and cheers.
Cheers.